Oh, we're on? Hey, what's up, everybody? Fight Hype Live, back at it again. Some huge news coming through. Looks like, unfortunately, not the news we were all looking forward. Not Crawford Spence. Instead, it's going to be Crawford versus David Avanesyan. But before we really jump into it, I just want some people to hop into the chat, hop into the live, and then we'll get started here. But definitely not the news I was hoping to come and bring with you guys at some point. I was hoping, hey, Spence Crawford is official. You know, the biggest welterweight fight since Mayweather-Pacquiao. A fight we wanted to put up there with De La Hoya Trinidad and Leonard Hearns and Mayweather-Pacquiao and De La Hoya Mosley is kind of the biggest welterweight fights of the last, let's say almost half century. But that was not to be. Instead, we're getting Terrence Crawford and David Avanesyan. But just going to check the chat and wait until we get some people in here to get it popping.
Promise.
But let me see the check. I got about 123 in here. Bean Saucy, what's up? Says he's so disappointed in Crawford. I imagine there's going to be people disappointed with all parties. That's kind of how that goes for the fans when a big fight doesn't happen that we've all been waiting for. Connor Stevens says too much politics. Let's see here. Yeah, what's up, Gustavo Fontalba? What's up, Gustavo? Why isn't Crawford fighting Jaron Ennis? Is Tyree Howard? We'll touch on that in a minute. Okay, but let's see. Wow, how crazy is boxing? The man Conor Benn avoided gets the big fight. Spence might as well go to 154. How are you disappointed in Crawford? They brought nonsense to the table. Bud signed, and it's all his fault. And Errol says, Debonair Darian Smith. Errol should fight Jaron Boots Ennis or Sanyonis, beat them, and have more negotiation power in their fight to come, especially since Crawford has gotten stopped by Mean Machine. He didn't get stopped by Mean Machine. He stopped Mean Machine. It's not the fighters, it's the men in the suits. Crawford was trying to make the fight, but they were lowballing him. All right, so I guess we'll get started. $1 Trillion Dreams is comment there. Your comment that he got lowballed. I come on here live to talk about this fight with you guys. I got to be honest, to speak from a factual point is not the easiest when talking about Spence and Crawford because $1 Trillion, you said something about the offer. We don't really know the offer. All that's been reported, and a lot of things have been reported in the lead up to this fight that have turned out not to be so. In this fight that hasn't been made yet, Spence Crawford. It's been reported that Crawford is receiving a career high payday in excess of 8 figures. But we don't know what the money was on the table for Spence Crawford. So we don't know if he technically is turning down a more lucrative offer by fighting Avanesyan, or if he's getting more money fighting Avanesyan than he would against Errol Spence. And this is a very much a fringe broadcaster. It's on an app called BLK Prime, an app I am just now starting to hear about. I do know they've had some fights on there. Brian Norman, I guess, was scheduled to fight there November 12th. So it is a network that's done some boxing, but I think 90% of us listening to this probably didn't hear BLK Prime. And I got dogs in the back. And it's hard. Where was I? Because it's such a convoluted situation. So there's so much of what we're here. Terrence Crawford doesn't love to do interviews. So whenever he's been asked about this fight, he won't talk about it. Errol Spence, same thing, has been kind of one word answers, one sentence reply. It's going to happen. It's going to happen next. It's going to happen next. And then, there's really no one to get the real numbers from on what was offered. There's rumors that Crawford wanted to take a look at all the revenue because he wasn't getting a guarantee. He was going to get a percentage. And so he wants to know everything that's going to be on the bill for. But that was reported just like November 19th was reported, and neither one happens. And then it's not like Errol or his the PBC comes out and clears it up and says, no, this is the factual information. So, we're stuck here in a lot of confusion and in murky territory. And Crawford's going on to fight David Avanesyan, and to kind of just sink my teeth into that fight, Crawford's going to get another knockout. He's knocked out everyone since Victor Postal, and this fight should be no different. David Avanesyan's a come-forward southpaw. Errol Spence is so much better than David Avanesyan, and he can take a step back behind his great long jab, and he can step off and shoulder roll a little bit, and he can fight going backwards. And David Avanesyan is just a come-forward bruiser, but he is a southpaw, and he makes for a decent stay-busy fight. Crawford hasn't been able to fight since last November, so beyond any of the political business talk, getting into what I like, the sport. This is good for Crawford in terms of staying sharp. He was going to wind up fighting Spence having not fought in over a year by the time they would have gotten in the ring. And now he gets to face a southpaw who comes forward. And let me just read the comments here for a second. Crawford's new opponent was stopped by Mean Machine is what I said. He has 3 losses total. Yes. He lost to Lamont Peterson. He got stopped by Adijis Kaviaskis, a.k.a. Mean Machine. And then he lost early in his career. One of his first 4 or 5 fights, he took a L. Luciano Dadon says this is a blatant duck. But that's what... It's tough, because if you're Crawford, you feel like you wanted to make this fight in 2021, 2020, 2019, when fans, economically the fight's bigger now. And that's the thing with us as fans, we want the fight to happen at the peak of its critical value, when both guys are in their 20s and they're in their physical primes and all that. But a lot of the time it's been proven, Mayweather-Pacquiao, you'll make more money exhausting your other options in the division before you close in on the most lucrative one. If you're good enough as a fighter, if you can clear out the division and beat everybody else, it eventually makes that one fight people have been asking for all the more bigger, and you make more money doing it. But with the way boxing happens, fighting twice a year, sometimes once a year, that marination process takes a couple years now, and guys slip into their 20s, into their 30s, and that's what's happened with Crawford Spence. And so Crawford, said he wanted the fight in 2019, 2020, 2021. Spence and them had other plans, and now Spence in 2022 has done everything he can to make the fight, and it's Crawford who's went and got other plans. So they've both given each other this kind of game, this kind of medicine, and I don't think it's been good for us, the fans, because now we don't get Crawford Spence. Let me just see what you guys are saying. Bud wasted everyone's time and energy, including his. He didn't even want the fight back then. He was capping, says Michael. True School Sports says, in a fair and just, I see a bunch of ducks. So people letting it know how they... Elusive Storm, Spence priced himself out in negotiation, posted 1 million ducks. So we got people saying Crawford's ducking, Spence is ducking. And this is what I mean. You're going to get Spence people saying Spence was ducking, Crawford saying Crawford people was ducking. But until these people give us some numbers and some information, it's speculation. And it doesn't reflect good, in my opinion, on everyone, But True School Sports says, in a fair and just world, the governing bodies would strip both Crawford and Spence, so the division is being held hostage by these two. I don't think, no, I think you're taking it a step too far. I think in a fair and just world, they'd just be, they would fight, and whatever fighter brings to the table is what they take home. They take home, they eat what they kill. And I know that was a point of contention in this fight too, because Spence's, pay-per-view numbers were stronger than Crawford's. But then, the fans and Crawford, they don't want to hear that. They know that this is the 1 and 2 top welterweights. And so the sport of boxing, forget the business, the sport of boxing wants these two to square off. And I think the business, in always being the business, sometimes it long-term is affecting the sport's bottom line, the more that these fights don't get made. But that's another topic for another day. But I think these guys would just have to fight what they kill. And that was a point of contention, because Spence is doing pay-per-views around 300,000 buys, and Crawford isn't cracking, nearly 200,000. So if you go off the numbers, Spence was going to be guaranteed a larger percentage than Crawford was, because he was a bigger draw. He is a bigger draw, factually, by the numbers. So it's just a very murky situation to talk about. Maybe Heyman didn't want this fight outshining the Tank Garcia fight. I don't think that's the case. I think they wanted to make both of those fights. And Crawford went ahead and got a backdoor deal, apparently with a big guarantee. So, and I don't know if we're even going to get the fight period now, because Spence already tweeted that, or he didn't tweet, but he spoke to the Dallas News out there in Dallas and said that he probably has to move up very soon. And I believe it. He does have a hard time getting all the way down to 147. He's probably getting closer to being a 154-pounder, squeezing down to 147. So, it's honestly a mess, guys, if I'm being real, because in the 1980s, Leonard and Hearns fight at 22 and 25 years old. These guys are 32 and 35 and can't quite make a deal. So let me see. Oh, someone donated $5. Let's be honest, Crawford wanted a tune-up. Maybe that is the case. He didn't fight in a year, and he gets to fight a southpaw. And about this fight with Avanesyan, Crawford, Kenny Porter mentioned before his son Sean fought Terrence that Terrence had been getting away from his defense a little bit. And because he's getting so many knockouts, no one's went the distance with him since Obama was in his second term in 2016, Victor Postal. So Terrence has just been turning it up, forcing the exchanges and winning the exchanges with his counterpunching. And he's getting guys out of there. With Avanesyan, if this fight does go through, because I got to see it to believe it first. You never know. These fringe network deals sometimes, like Tevin Farmer and Mickey Bay were supposed to fight and it never went off. I do think it'll go off because, I don't think it had been reported on as such. I don't think the name as big as Crawford would have a date in place and an opponent and everything if it wasn't legit. But you never know. But I think in this fight with Avanesyan, Crawford should take his time, because he's just been getting into exchanges and knocking guys out. And in this, against Errol Spence, he's going to need his defense. He's going to have to be on his P's and Q's. So this might, instead of getting Avanesyan out of there in 4 or 5 rounds, which would be exciting, and I think he could get Avanesyan out of there in 4 or 5 rounds, he should carry him for some rounds and work on his defense. Let Avanesyan shoot off some shots, make sure his defense is sharp heading into next year, heading into a potential Spence fight. And that he should just get some rounds in with Avanesyan and work on his defense, work on his boxing skills, and not just turn it up and be the killer counterpuncher in the exchanges and get him out of there. He should use Avanesyan as a true tune-up and tune everything up. That's just my opinion. And then as for Spence, man, where he's going to go next, he's saying he might not even be at welterweight anymore. His 3 options as mandatories: Keith Thurman, who he said he'll never fight; Stan Jonas, who's a good fighter, but I don't think there's a single person in the chat that would pick Stan Jonas to beat Errol Spence. He's not experienced, and he's a come-forward, explosive fighter, but he doesn't punch as hard as Errol Spence. He's not as physically strong as Errol Spence. He doesn't have Spence's defense or his jab. So Stan Jonas ain't beating Errol Spence. We know that. That's the WBA route. And then the most sexy route, of course, is the IBF route, taking on Jaron Boots Ennis. But Jaron Boots Ennis poses way too big of a risk for way too small of a reward for us to really think Errol's going to go ahead and go that direction. Same for Terrence Crawford. We know there's a really good chance Crawford's not going to go in the Jaron Ennis direction. And that's a shame, because that's the guy that should 100% get the shot next by either fighter if they're not going to face each other. We all know Ennis is the most talented up-and-coming welterweight in the division, but I doubt he gets a shot at either guys. And that continues to not look good to the fans of boxing, that we're at a point in the sport where we're not getting Crawford Spence, and we don't even expect the next best guy in line in terms of, talent. He hasn't proven it resume-wise, but Jaron Ennis, we don't even humor ourselves with thinking one of them will fight him, even though he is an IBF mandatory. So for Spence, Stan Jonas looks like the most realistic option, because what I just said about Ennis, and because he's already said he'll never fight Thurman. And then, but then a move up to 154, what does that bring for Errol Spence? Because he doesn't want to do the Jermell Charlo fight for understandable reasons. They're gym mates. They both got the same trainer. So I'm not sure. Him and Virgil Ortiz would be a great all-Texas battle. Maybe, it seems like there's some talk between Showtime and Golden Boy, obviously, right now, trying to make Tank versus Ryan. I think they tried to make Charlo versus Munguia. So, if they can thaw that ice and melt that ice, and somehow that relationship becomes good, Golden Boy and Showtime, maybe Errol can fight Virgil Ortiz, but that seems like a long shot too. Terrence Crawford, I thought Virgil Ortiz was going to be Terrence Crawford's plan B, not David Avanesyan on BLK Prime. I thought Virgil Ortiz maybe securing a big guarantee from DAZN, and Virgil Ortiz, who's his WBO mandatory, I thought that was going to be the plan B. But it turns out we get David Avanesyan, absolutely a tune-up fight, absolutely a non-competitive fight where Crawford will likely keep his perfect knockout streak at welterweight going. But that's not the fight you guys wanted to hear. Spence versus Lubin, says Jeff Campbell. That does nothing for Spence because Lubin showed so much heart in losing to Fundora, but he still came up short and he doesn't have a world title, so that does nothing for Spence. Let's see. Do you ever see Spence versus Charlo? I don't. And I love Jermell Charlo right now. I love boxer punchers. I think he had, along with Bam Rodriguez against Risaket Soren Visai, I think Jermell Charlo had the performance of 2022 when he knocked out Brian Castano to become undisputed. He showed everything, slickness, boxing off the back foot, great jab, counter punching, power in both hands. I think Charlo, as long as he's right in between the ears mentally and focused and has the right IQ, he could beat Spence or Crawford moving up to 154. He's bigger, more explosive, and more dangerous than them. He would just have to prove he could play chess mentally with them. Let me see here. This is why boxing may get cut from the new Showtime and Paramount Plus deal, says and still. And this is why before I came on, I was like, I don't know how much the fans are really going to dig what I'm saying because I'm not going to run with speculation. You know what I mean? That's speculative. I understand why people run with different things, and I don't mean to say run with it as if you're grasping for straws and there's no logic to those thoughts. I don't mean it that way. But me as basically a reporter in the sport, I can't run with opinion and with assumptions and things like that. So when I came on this morning, it's a daunting task. I honestly just want to come on and talk about the style matchup. I want to talk about the sport because the business, it leads to so much speculation. I don't know the numbers. I don't know the guarantee offered to Terrence Crawford for Errol Spence versus the guaranteed offer to him for David Avanesyan. I do know fans are going to be disappointed with this outcome. I do know that both people have an argument. I know the PBC has an argument that we've built our guy right. We've filled Cowboy Stadium with 40 to 50,000 people. We've done numbers on pay-per-view. You're a free agent now. Let's make the fight at a time where it's bigger than it's ever been. Sign the contract, make a deal. And then I get Crawford's point of, I wanted to make this fight for years, and you guys froze me out because I was with, quote, the wrong promoter, the wrong side of the street. And now you guys want to clap your hands and make a deal. Well, I don't know if I like the deal, and maybe I got a better deal for a much easier fight over here, and I'm going to do this. And so now the shoe goes on the other foot a little bit. But even that is speculation. It's only the people involved in this business truly know in this deal. The real people involved in trying to make Spence Crawford truly knows what have happened. And we're all left to speculate and be left with the disappointment of it all. And I'm just trying to pick up the pieces. Crawford knocks out Avanesyan. He should take his time and work on everything in this fight. Yeah, he could make it a firefight like he's been doing and get him out of there in 4 or 5. But, he should, check everything in the car before he puts it on the Autobahn in Germany, puts it on the fastest track, puts it against Errol Spence. And then for Spence, the IBF mandatory is the sexiest fight, Jaron Ennis, but we know that fight's just not going to happen right now. It doesn't make business sense yet. The Thurman fight I still like because Thurman has a name. Thurman only has 1 loss. He's still talented. He's not as athletic as he used to be, but he's a good puncher. He knows how to set traps. There's history there. It'd be a good promotion. Maybe with this latest turn of events, Errol changes his heart and says, all right, fine, let's do the Thurman fight. But now that fight's in jeopardy, Spence Crawford, because Spence might very well move up to 154, and Jermell's undisputed there, and that's not a fight they're interested in, it would seem. So everything's in limbo now, and we'll see. And Virgil Ortiz, the other most exciting welterweight outside of Crawford, Spence, Boots, and even if you want to throw Thurman in there, he's on DAZN, and we don't know, if he ever gets in the ring with Spencer Crawford either. So it's tough. The days of, 1981 and 25-year-old Sugar Ray Leonard and 22-year-old Tommy Hearns are long gone. And it's, boxing's still trying to find its footing in this new economic model where we got a million different streaming platforms. It's not just 5 channels like it was when Leonard and Hearns were fighting. I don't even know how popular cable was in 1981, let alone cable, streaming, YouTube, internet. And so let's see here. Stan Jonas, man, quit setting the fans up for a letdown. Tony T, I already said that does seem like the most likely of opponents, and Stan Jonas is definitely a superior opponent to David Avanesyan, whose career highlight was retiring a very old and shop-worn Sugar Shane Mosley. GG says, so are the days of 5 million pay-per-view buys. Yeah, those are long gone. I mean, 5 million pay-per-views has technically never existed. The all-time record is 4.6 by Mayweather-Pacquiao. But the last boxing pay-per-view to do over 1 million buys was technically Floyd Mayweather, Logan Paul. And if you subtract that, because it's an exhibition, it was Canelo Triple G 2 on HBO, a network that doesn't even do boxing anymore. So we're all working through this new transition in the sport and trying to get the biggest fights made. Let's see here. I thought Boots was supposed to fight Stan Jonas. No, last I heard, Boots was in some rumors to be potentially facing Rashidi Ellis, a very very fast, good, undefeated welterweight. That's a good fight for Boots. Stiff jabs. Spence can fight everybody, but they're not Crawford, period. Well, vice versa. Crawford could fight anybody, but they're not Spence. Bud should change his name to Clown. Bud's about to cash out. He's getting it independently. Nate C says, any chance PBC puts Tank on the same night as Crawford? I don't think so, because they don't have any dates announced for December 10th yet. And Tank, the rumors I keep hearing about are early January for a potential Ryan Garcia fight for Tank coming back to pay-per-view. So, no, I don't think... it is, let me check my phone. It's October 21st? So we're like 6 weeks out from December 10th. I mean, that's not impossible, but no, I don't think they're going to put on a date to compete with December 10th. And, no diss to BLK Prime, but, again, I want to see this fight actually come off and see it to believe it, because, Big Triller, Cambosis versus Teofimo Lopez never happened. When these networks come in and they throw in a lot of money to fighters, sometimes when it comes down for rubber to meet the road, it just doesn't happen. Mickey Bates, Tevin Farmer, Teofimo versus Cambosis. I mean, those were hairy situations, especially Teo and George, but we'll see, man. Then Jay Spence, have you ever heard of BLK Prime? Is that who's putting the fight on? That is who's putting the fight on. We do have a press release here on FightHype. I even tried to look into the ownership, and it wasn't easy to find a lot of information. It's owned by EFC, a private LLC, and it was I couldn't really find who's the chief operating officer and all that. I mean, I'm sure you can get to it. That's the internet's for, but just looking through the first few pages you find on the internet, it's kind of vague and hard to find information on the company. So here's the press release. We got it here up on FightHype. We'll have the price and everything. Pound for pound superstar Terrence Bud Crawford makes long-awaited return to the ring December 10th as he faces former European champion and the WBC number 4 ranked David Avanesyan. By the way, maybe now we know why David Avanesyan, Virgil Ortiz, David Avanesyan never happened. I know it was Virgil Ortiz's side that couldn't come to terms, but Avanesyan winds up getting a bigger fight than Virgil Ortiz in the end. Fight will be streamed live by BLK Prime for the price of $39.99. So if they're paying Terrence in excess of $10 million and the pay-per-view is $40, how many pay-per-views would they have to buy to cover their nut? It would be, let's see, I went to college. I could probably do the calculator in my head, but let's just do the calculator. At $39.99, which is what the pay-per-view is going to do, what would they have to do to actually make back just $10 million alone to just pay Terrence alone? 40 times, let's say 500,000 buys. is $20 million. Okay, so 450,000 times 40 would get them to 18 million. So let's do 400,000 times 40 would get them to 16 million. Okay, so they got to probably sell about 300,000 pay-per-views or so, 350,000 pay-per-views to make enough money with the pay-per-view revenue alone, not ticket sales, not any ad revenue. And I don't really like this stuff. I'd rather talk about the jab and punches both fighters throw in their defense. But to put the calculator out for a minute, looks like they got to crack at least about 300K to have enough to pay Terrence his purse and still have some room to pay David Avanesyan and everything else. So good luck with that, because I believe Spence nor Crawford have done in excess of 350,000 buys. Even when Spence and Porter fought, it did about 300K. So let's just call it long odds that if indeed Terrence is getting paid $10 million, it's their money. I'm not pocket watching. But that's about what they're going to have to turn to make a profit. I don't think that fight's going to do that. So stuff like that. And now here we go with speculation. This is why it's not always fun. What the big dogs say? Hold on. Mario Serrano is their publicist. We'll just ask him who's behind the company. There we go. Yeah, we'll just ask Mario Serrano who runs BLK Prime. And where was I on now? Yeah, the business side. So that's about what it's going to have to do. What did Roy Jones versus Bernard Hopkins do when they did that pay-per-view? That definitely did less than 200,000. That was 2010. They didn't even fight on HBO pay-per-view. That's right. HBO said, nah, we're good. And Bernard and Roy said, well, we're doing this rematch, damn it, like no matter what, whether you guys want the fight or not. So then they put it on pay-per-view, and I think it did like 100,000 something. I was at that fight. I was actually at the Roy Jones Bernard Hopkins rematch, and yeah, it was probably one of the worst fights I ever attended, aside from a brawl that happened like at the end of the 7th round. But yeah, and that was Roy and Bernard, right? Who weren't able to do 200. So. Yeah, Crawford and Avanesyan hitting 300 to 350K, that's going to be tough. That's just tough to do in boxing now, period, you know. UK Rob Boxing, thanks for the live, Sean. A shame it is that this is what has brought you here. Hey, we're getting used to. Oh, right, that's the point I was at. Okay, that's the point I was at when I was talking about speculation, and then. So the part, again, this is speculation, but this is what leads you to say, you know, what's up with boxing? Is there money laundering in boxing? Because how can a company guarantee 10 million plus to a fighter in a fight where, if you look at the simple research of it doesn't figure to make that much money to be able to pay off the full amount of the fighter's purses guaranteed. So that's where you start going, who's involved in this and what exactly is going on here? And that's nothing new in boxing. So you know, you have at it. 7-8 Sports TV, I see, is in the chat. The suit and tie cats don't want the fight. So 7-8, I know you got your channel, man. I've seen Deontay Wilder on your channel. I remember when you know, Deontay wasn't talking and he went on the channel. So shout out. Thank you for coming in the chat. Boxers shouldn't have to take so many steps back because of a loss. It has them scared to take the risks. Well, when you fight twice a year in the biggest fights, you know, you don't want one of them to be a loss. And you know, I'm not the man to figure it all out, but I don't know how we get there. But fighters do need to be more active, and fights like Spence Crawford do need to be made more often. But, you know, boxing's had these problems for decades. It just seems accentuated now in the moment, you know, as we're being in the moment of this latest fight not coming off. Do I watch UFC? I do not. I don't watch UFC. I never watched it. I'm an old school loyal boxing guy. I remember when UFC was on the come up with Chuck Liddell and those guys. Dana White bashed boxing. He was smart. He's a very smart businessman. He shit all over boxing. He did the WWF WCW thing where, you know, it it was guerrilla warfare, and he did everything he could to get his company over as the preeminent combat sport. And while I don't hold that against him as a businessman, that stuck with me. That hurt as a young teenager boxing fan, and that made me salty towards mixed martial arts. And so I always kept it loyal to boxing. I felt like I was cheating on boxing if I watched UFC. Now I know that's silly. I know most people watch UFC and boxing, and those UFC fighters have gotten so much more athletic. Chuck Liddell back in the day had the steroid gut and had slow hands but could punch. These guys now are so athletic, so fast on their feet, and I give them all the credit in the world, but I just stick to boxing. That's my baby. That's my love. Who said that? Boston says, I'll supply you guys with the illegal link when the fight's on. Very nice. 2 cents boxing sounds like money laundering to me, but that's just my 2 cents. Well, I mean, yeah. It's tough. I see these people in the real world. I can't just I speculate like you guys too sometimes, but I gotta come correct with some facts. So, but there's a lot of business models in boxing that go, did that fight really make money? And I'm talking everyone. I'm not picking on not one faction of boxing. Let's talk about the fact, Slim Creeper, let's talk about the fact that Bud was negotiating a whole separate fight at the same time as the Spence fight. It's not hard to take a guess who was more in it. Slim Creeper hitting us with when you look at it from a relationship point of view, that you make a point. If you're over here talking with a girl, but meanwhile you really got plan B girl here in the back, how committed were you to getting married to the first girl all along, that kind of thing? How committed was Terrence Crawford to making an Errol Spence fight when all along he had this David Avanesyan option in his back pocket? I hear you. Very fair point to bring up, Slim Creeper. And I see Spence now is saying, God damn it, I could have fought in November instead of wasting this time. And Terrence went and says, I do have a fight in December. Yeah. But, Crawford gets a tuna. Now, if you're a Spence fan, did you want Crawford to have an excuse? If Spence went on to stop Terrence Crawford or win that fight, did you really want to hear Crawford fans saying he hadn't fought in over a year and he's 35 years old? At least with this, he's going to knock any and all rust off, and there will be no excuses heading in. I mean, you can still point to age. He's going to be 35, but that'll lessen any excuses heading into Spence Crawford. Lady Chan Dundam Season, thank you so much for the donation, and thank you again. Shout outs earlier to the 2 $5 donations earlier. Thanks guys for coming in and dropping that. But Lady Chan Dundam Season, how committed was Errol Spence when he had the Canelo fight? He never really had the Canelo fight. That was just something floated out on Canelo Bivol fight week. Once we were arrived at Canelo Bivol fight week, and there wasn't that much buzz for it, and it was just pointed out, hey, there's not a lot of buzz for this Canelo Bivol fight. We could have been watching Canelo Charlo, Canelo Benavidez, and even Canelo Spence. And so it wasn't really like that fight had a whole lot of, marination and whatnot. It just got revealed after the fact. So it's not like Errol was putting all his eggs in that basket. Errol, to his credit, has, since the Ugas fight, put all his eggs in the Terrence Crawford basket. He said what he's needed to say to make the fight happen. So I think Errol definitely wanted this fight to happen, but there is a little bit of that play of, now you want the fight to happen, but now you got to wait after, maybe Crawford's wanted the fight to happen for a few years and it hasn't, and he's had to wait. Now the shoe's on the other foot. So hopefully after both guys get their Motrin, get their Allegra, get their cold medicine, after they both get a dose of this medicine we all got to eat, then they'll make the fight in early 2023. A very wise man in boxing told me it would only make all the sense in the world to build it as the Super Bowl of boxing the day before the Super Bowl. And, Super Bowl's played on Sunday, early February. Why not the night before with a huge Fox promotion, have a Fox pay-per-view, Spence Crawford the night before the Super Bowl on a Saturday? That would do big numbers. It'd probably produce the biggest number possible for Spence Crawford. So, hopefully Crawford gets it in December and we get a quick turnaround. But when's the last time Terrence Crawford or anybody's fought 2 times in 3 months? I mean, Canelo's done it a couple of times, 2 times in 4 months, but that I don't know. I don't know if we'll get Crawford turned around that quickly. And Spence might be feeling some kind of way now. You know, fuck that. Now I want to get a fight in, or just fuck 147 altogether. I'm going to 54. We don't know what we're gonna get, but you know, fingers crossed. And you know, I imagine there's some people who are even okay with this ship sailing. Is there some people in the chat who got so tired of waiting for the fight to happen that once it didn't come off for the 2022, you were either relieved or you didn't care anymore, or no? Is everyone in the chat just pissed off and we got to get Crawford Spence through hell or high water, period? You know, like we did Mayweather-Pacquiao. We gutted it out for 5-6 years at Mayweather-Pacquiao. We never stopped banging the drum, and they made it. Is that how you guys feel? Fuck that. Just keep banging the drum. Or is there even some people in the chat who are like, man, I'm good anyways. I can't keep going through this with these 2 fighters. So you guys let me know. I'm on the opinion of, look, now is not the time to point fingers. Let Crawford get his fight in, and let's build this thing up to be as big as possible. I love the idea that the wise man gave me about putting the fight on the day before on Fox pay-per-view. Let Crawford get his tune-up in. You still fought in April, Errol, against the top opponent in Ugas. You should be good and sharp. Let's just make the fight happen ASAP 2023. But you guys let me know in the chat if some of you are already over it. Let's see. J. Doe Elliott says if Spence fights better competition and Crawford fights this guy, Spence will still be a major A side and Crawford still won't get what he wants. Bank on yourself and say yes. Well, if the reported purse is true, at least Crawford would be $10 million richer before taking the same deal that's going to be on the table now against Errol Spence. And Spence is the A side. And, you know, Crawford Avanesyan isn't going to do some crazy number that's going to all of a sudden flip the financial splits of Spence Crawford. And again, we don't know what that split was. Was PBC offering 80-20? Was it 60-40? We don't know. Anything would be pure speculation. UK Rob Boxing says, for me, the boxing news cycle has been getting more and more depressing. The sport I love is losing me slowly. Well, Rob, I know you work in boxing too, Rob. And I work, you know, when you work around the sport long enough, it's gonna wear you thin sometimes. It's gonna be a girl that breaks your heart and frustrates you. So, you know, Rob, maybe some of it is us feeling that, you know, and some of it might be us, Rob. Let's not put it all on the sport, but I hear you. I feel that way too sometimes. But the sport will go on, you know. Tank and Ryan will hopefully happen. 0-0-0. AJ and Fury, Godfather of Boxing said, yeah, we're all pissed now about this fight. We already had the AJ and Fury fight fall through. Now we've been waiting on this fight. But you know what I mean? But there you go. That's Matchroom and Frank Warren. Their fight fell apart. You know, Crawford, and when he was with Arum, you know, PBC top rank couldn't make a deal. Then he leaves top rank, still can't make a deal. Warren and Hearn can't make a deal over there. Golden Boy doesn't want to make a deal with Showtime and Espinoza. It's across the board, and this is where we're at in the game. This is where we're at in the game a little bit, you know, and some things got to change a little bit. I think everybody knows that, and but it's hard to point the finger at who and what and where when it's across the board in boxing. You know, I'm not going to single out Matchroom. I'm not going to single out Top Rank. I'm not going to single out PBC. You know, even I don't even want to single out Crawford or Spence. I just want it to get better. I'm like you guys. I just want it to get better. Tank versus Ryan. Let's go. What is that official? Or that's just you saying full steam ahead. Tank versus Ryan. Let's put Crawford and Spence on the back burner for now and just move forward with the hopes that we get that fight. Wishful thinking, yes. Well, there's a lot on the line. It seems like to me there's a lot on the line in Tank and Ryan, that there's a couple of fights on the line with Tank and Ryan. If they make Tank and Ryan, they can make Charlo Munguia. They can make Virgil Ortiz against a top welterweight. You know, technically, if Tank and Ryan makes a fight, I mean, Showtime has Boots and is signed. So You could even start the early processes of getting Boots and Virgil Ortiz ready if they can make this Ryan Tank fight, and that ice can get thawed, that ice can get melted. That's an icy relationship, Golden Boy Promotions and Steven Espinoza of Showtime and PBC. But there's money to be made with those parties, and there's big fights to be made. So, just like I'm saying with Crawford and Spence, truthfully, the time is not the time to point fingers. It's the time to make fights. It's the time to do something right for the sport. And that's the same thing with the Golden Boy and Showtime thing. Perhaps it's really not time to go down memory lane and talk about who did what and who deserves to be A-side. There's business to be made. There's money to be made. There's fights to be made. We got to have people start coming to the table and making fights. Benavidez versus Kadagi in January confirmed, but on what undercard? No, that's not an undercard. No way. Benavidez Kadagi. That's going to be its own card in Texas. I heard David told us in the interview, probably Texas. Patricos G. And then no. Charlo Zoo's going to be its own card too. Those are going to be two separate main events in January. And it's shaping up to be a big 2023 because 2022 ended like a popcorn fart. 2022 fizzled out weekly. None of the big fights got made in this to end 2022. Canelo Triple G3 was a snoozer compared to their first two fights. So, it ended. The little guys, Chocolatito and Estrada, going to give us a good fight in December, I'm sure. But yeah, it was a popcorn fart to end 2022 for the sport of boxing. But on the bright side, that shapes up for 2023 to be big. 2023, we got David Benavidez and Caleb Plant probably lined up. Hopefully Tank and Ryan. Hopefully Spence and Crawford. And Tyson Fury will probably face either Usyk or Joshua at some point. Wilder will face Ruiz. So, Charlo and Zoo is already penciled in. So, 23 will be better, but 2022 did not end well in Q4, as they call it, quarter four. So James Caleb says the offer wasn't fair, and anyway, now Spence can stop ducking Thurman and fight him at last. But that's the thing. Like, we don't know. We don't know the offer, my friend. We don't know. We don't know what the offers were, so we don't know who's ducking who. We just know that we're not really happy with it. Kind of makes you the big man, FightHype, kind of makes you appreciate Devin Haney a little more for saying, fuck it, I'll fight that dude twice in this country, and I'll give Top Rank an extra fight. Exactly. Some compromise, some give. Nobody wants to give. It needs to be on my network. It needs to be on my network. I'm the A side. It needs to. Devin compromised. He if you want something, you have to give something sometimes, and that's what Haney understood in that process. I'm sure he would have loved to have fought Teofimo Lopez for the Undisputed Lightweight Championship in the United States, but instead he has to go on the road, Cambosis, Australia, agree to all terms, but he does it, and he's still locked in for another fight, and he might have to suck down to an uncomfortable 135 and fight a very dangerous Lomachenko, but guess what? He'll be better for it, and boxing will be better for it when it compromises, when it gives people, things have to work in good faith. I know these promoters in part haven't worked with each other because they don't trust one another, and they probably don't have very good relationships. You hear the way Bob Arum talks about Eddie Hearn. You hear the way Eddie Hearn talks about Bob Arum, and you Top Rank and PBC have been in court and you hear the way Eddie Hearn talks. So you hear the way they don't have good relationships. So they don't. If you have if you have a great stable and I have a great stable, and there's some fights to be made that the fans want to see, right? I'm not going to want to make the fight unless I feel like there's a really good chance my guy's going to win. But maybe I'd make that fight with your stable. Maybe I'll make the fight where my guy is probably going to lose if in good faith I trust you'll make the fight when the shoe's on the other foot. That when my guy's the favorite, but it makes business sense, you'll go ahead and put your guy in there even though he's the underdog. And I think that kind of good faith hasn't happened. And also in the fighters to the promoters, fighters, they're fighting once or twice a year because they want their guaranteed quota each and every time they step in the ring, that quota's met. Well, they might be able to fight 3 or 4 or 5 times a year if they met that quota 1 or 2 out of the 4 times, and not every single time expecting that $2.5 million payday, because the budgets the networks have, they can't fit you in 3 or 4 times if you're expecting a $2-3 million payday. But maybe we could see these guys be more active if they had a little more give. If they, all right, I'll fight this easier fight for $700K, then I'll come back 3 months later for $350K, and then the big fight for $3 million later in the year, that kind of thing. So, I'm not a businessman. I like to cover the sport aspect of boxing, but clearly Crawford Spence is a wake-up call. This is a wake-up call. It's been a long time coming, but it's a wake-up call that some things in boxing need to be addressed and need to be done differently. I'm being vague about it because to really get to the particulars about it, you got to have all the facts in place, and I'm working on that as we speak. But so Velocity Cuts, MGM. So is MGM booked February 4th for Spence versus Crawford or Ruiz versus Wilder? I don't know, but interesting information that it is booked February 4th. It just doesn't look good. Like, you have to give, right? Back to that, you have to give point. Sean Porter, he gave. Okay, I got to go to this network. Fine, I gotta take. This is the check that's coming my way. The $4 million. You're gonna cut me a check. Fine, I got to be the B side. Whatever. All right, cool. Let's make a fight happen. And as I'm saying this, I imagine some of you would say that's Terrence Crawford this time. Terrence Crawford has to do what Sean Porter did to make the Terrence Crawford fight. Terrence Crawford has to do what Sean Porter just did to make the fight with Errol Spence. Got to go across the street and take what the offer is and be the B side and win the fight, And so I get it. There will be that argument. There will be arguments every which direction, but that's not really what we want to do. We don't want to argue. Who wants to argue, well, what was the purse split? Who wants to argue, well, what network was it supposed to be on? And what was it? We want to argue who's going to win the fight. We want to argue, why did Crawford or Spence win the fight the morning after it actually happened? But here we go. Dan Glezak says, I guarantee you Bud won't fight Errol on February 4th because he'll say it's too soon since his last fight. I mean, to be fair, yeah, he fights once a year sometimes now. So to imagine him fighting 2 times in 3 months, I don't know. I think that do the best business sense for their fight, because fighting the day before a Super Bowl would be huge on a Fox pay-per-view. Spence should just go to 154 and vacate. Go to 154 and do what? He's not going to fight Jermell Charlo. He's not going to fight his gym mate. What's the fight there? Crawford lied about everything. Fundora is a good fight. That is a really good fight. Good stylistic fight. Errol Spence loves to kill. Errol Spence is a master inside where he would have to be at all night to kill the body of Sebastian Fundora. Yeah, Spence might chop that tree down if they made that fight. That would be a good fight. But is that what you want? If you're Errol Spence, you want to be fighting 6'6" monsters with in non-title fights? Is that what you want? I mean, it's a good fight. It's a good fight. It's a credible fight. But I just mean to go from undisputed versus Terrence Crawford to fighting an undefeated contender who's selling out 2,000 seats at the StubHub. Errol want money, right? And so did Terrence, apparently. And apparently he got it. I don't know how, but he got it. And a big guarantee with BLK Prime. Spence should fight Triple G for his belts. Spence at 160, but at 140. Spence versus Fundora on pay-per-view in Dallas. Watch. Think so? That's a good... I like that fight. I like that fight a lot better than Stan Jonas. It feels like Stan Jonas is the most likely fight for Spence next. But I like that Fundora fight better. Fundora is a competitive fight. He's going to eat Stan Jonas up. Stan Jonas ain't going to be able to do anything with the jab of Errol Spence. Can Thurman even make weight? Thurman can make weight. Thurman was actually more ripped against Mario Barrios than he ever was in his 20s. So Thurman can make weight. It's just now he's rusty again. Here we are. He was supposed to have fought again at this point. And again, that's speculation. I don't know if he's not fighting because of what I talked about earlier. he's had dates offered, but he doesn't want to get back in the ring unless he's going to get paid a certain amount of money like he was against Barrios. Or I don't know if he's been sitting on his hands saying, I will fight for 800K, 600K. Just get me back in the ring, and it just hasn't been able to get him a date. It's not enough transparency with that stuff sometimes. Spence versus Fundora for no belts isn't no pay-per-view fight. They better put that on free TV. I mean, Fundora does have the Mexican fan base that he would attract in Texas. Stylistically, it's a war. So in today's era, that is a pay-per-view fight. In today's era. But then again, I remember I ordered Jeff Lacey versus Robin Reed on Showtime pay-per-view back in like 2005. I want Eric Morales versus David Diaz was a pay-per-view. Manny Pacquiao versus Oscar Larios over in Manila was a pay-per-view. Hasim Rahman versus Monty Barrett back in the Boxing Talk days was a pay-per-view. Leo Santa Cruz is the co-main for De La Hoya versus Campas. Yeah, and Eric Morales fought a bum. Excuse me. Not a bum. If I ever say that word, I'm saying it relatively speaking to the elite world championship class of boxing. Every fighter that gets in there are no bums. They can all fight. They can all beat my ass. And even the guy who's got 6 wins and 10 losses. But Frank Velarde, relatively speaking, at the championship level was 17-4. He was a bum compared to Eric Morales. I swear, these type of fights don't have to be made for money or TV fights, but for boxing history. Ideally, Stephen Gallo, we get to a point where it all lines up perfect. Like De La Hoya Trinidad, the money was there and the history was there. Same for Leonard Hearns and, Crawford Spence. That's a little bit of the problem is this fight doesn't have the money in the pot available for it that the De La Hoya Trinidad had. This fight isn't a million pay-per-view buy fight. This fight is maybe a 500,000 pay-per-view buy fight. So less money to throw around makes the fight less easy to happen a little bit. When you got pots and pots and pots of gold for a Mayweather De La Hoya, the fight's going to happen at some point. There's money on the table for Crawford and Spence, but not the endless amount of cash that some of those other fights had. So, yeah. Uncle Sham with the crazy comment of the day. You win, sir. Blair Cobbs will knock out Errol Spence. That has 0 chance of ever happening, and you know that. But congrats. You win with the craziest comment so far of the day. Eric Horn says, just admit Crawford was lying for months. I don't know that. I don't. The money is there, Sean. Stop trying to make y'all's excuses for Bud, says Kirk McCall. If Canelo stays at 168, who does he fight? Benavidez, I hope, at some point. That's the best fight at 168. I like the Charlo fight in the meantime because I think David and Caleb have unfinished business, and the winner of that fight should get Canelo at 68. And that's going to be a nice little pay-per-view fight on its own, Caleb and David. But I like the Charlo fight for Canelo. Canelo's been having to fight bigger guys. Let him get a 60-pounder moving up, a big 60-pounder, a guy who's just as big as Canelo. So it's not like he's picking on a small guy, but let him fight Charlo, who's a marquee name, who's had a name in boxing for more than half a decade, who's undefeated. Yeah, the caliber of opposition hasn't been the best the last half decade, but he's beaten everybody that's put in front of him. He is explosive athlete. He can punch. He has a great jab. I like the Canelo-Charlo fight, but Charlo hasn't fought in 16 months. He's going through some things, and it just seems like there's more energy being put towards him staying at 160 and fighting Carlos Adames or trying to make a Jaime Munguia fight. So I don't know what's the best fight for Canelo as Plant and David Benavidez handle business with each other, hopefully in 2023. So I like the Charlo fight, but Charlo's is up in the air right now. He's in limbo. So closing in on an hour here. I know I got to get off in a minute. Got to get off soon. So we're going to close here in these last couple minutes. Anything else you guys want to talk about in the chat? I appreciate you guys rocking with me, and I appreciate you guys allowing me to be a little, at times vague, and because I can't run with opinion and speculation. I need some numbers here. and some facts. And there hasn't been a lot of facts and numbers thrown around Spence Crawford. We had the most official reports we had turned out to be inaccurate. November 19th, that was reported all Canelo Triple G3 fight week. And so this was really to come on here, talk with you guys, and talk about Crawford Avanesyan. He's gonna knock Avanesyan out. Avanesyan's a come forward southpaw, tailor made for Terrence Crawford, but it is a southpaw. It is a strong welterweight southpaw. It's not the worst tune-up in the world. And then Spence, meanwhile, Stan Jonas looks like the most likely option at welterweight. Thurman's is a sexier option. Ennis is the sexiest option outside of Crawford. And then a move up to 154. Fundora is the best fight for him there, since the Charlo fight isn't really one he's ever said he wants to make. Charlo has never wanted to make that fight either. They're friends. So Thurman at 154 works too. Thurman at 47 or 54 is still a good fight. Thurman isn't in his peak athletically, but against Barrios, he did make some adjustments in his 30s, slowing his pace down a little bit, setting more traps, still has power. But thank you guys for rocking with me. Going to get out of here in a second and just answer some last questions. Jabali Simpson, would Thurman still have the same incentive to fight Spence at 54 with no belts? Yeah, I think so. I mean, that fight is a big fight either way. I don't think it's about the belts. There's personal history there. There's a personal buildup between those two. And that fight might actually be better at 154 these days. These guys are in their 30s now. They might give us a better fight being rehydrated at 154 pounds than they would be boiling down to 147 anyways. So, no, I think Thurman's all for that fight. I just don't know if Errol Spence wants that fight. I don't know if he's going to have a change of heart. He might, because he might look at it and go, well, Stan Jonas is undefeated, but he hasn't really done anything. Thurman is an accomplished fighter in this era. He, former unified champ. He only lost to Pacquiao. All right, it's gonna make more eyeballs to come see the fight. I thought I was gonna fight Terrence. I'm not. All right, let's make the Thurman fight. You know, we might get that. We'll see. Battle 619. If PBC can't get Bud an 8-figure deal, then something went seriously wrong here. Again, but we don't know. So we don't know. But what we do know is December 10th, Crawford Avanesyan on BLK Prime. Dan Glezak, Tolja says Bud would fight Jermell at 154, not Jermell. Get your facts right. Okay. Are you saying that Crawford would be all for the fight, but not Charlo? Is that what you mean? I would love Crawford against Charlo. I would love that fight. Oh man, I would love that fight. But if Spence isn't happening, then Crawford Charlo's not happening. But I would love that fight. Rodney Manji says, if PBC didn't offer 10 mil, that's embarrassing. But I mentioned, and then Murd right before him says should be a $100 million fight, but it's not. The numbers, their pay-per-view numbers of each fighter don't tabulate to a fight that has $100 million in the pot. To give both fighters $10 million and still comfortably make some profit for themselves, the people putting on the fight's going to have to do at least about 500,000 buys. And I think that's a good number for Spence Crawford. I think there's a legitimate chance it wouldn't reach 500,000 buys. I think it would reach the 500,000 mark by. So, but that's what I mean. We don't know the official numbers that were offered to Terrence, and we say $10 million like it's easy to make back $10 million being paid out and if Terrence is getting $10 million, then that means Errol's probably getting closer to $15 million. And I really don't have fun discussing this part of the sport, but I do thank you guys for rocking with me and jumping in to talk about it with me. I'm looking forward to getting back to the fights themselves. Unfortunately, none of the ones we really wanted to see were able to go off for 2022. I hope 2023 brings us all the fights we were hoping to see at the end of this year. But thank you guys for rocking with me live. And we'll be back. We'll be back Sunday morning. With I'm sure I have a feeling we're going to have some more news to talk about Sunday morning. So I'll be locked back in. Thank you everyone for joining us with FightHype Live, and appreciate all boxing fans' patience. because it's being required right now. So thank you, everybody, and hopefully everything turns out good. Thanks, everyone.